Oh, okay. Well then. 2chan is basically the forerunner to 4chan, which are both forums you can access and utilize anonymously. And the whole anonymous part? Well, it allows for a more unfiltered look at, in this case, the minds of people who live in Japan. Yes, the room did get a little darker, by the way. I closed the curtains, my eyes were hurting. Anyways, these posts can get pretty disturbing, or not disturbing at all. See, it's kind of a mixed bag. You don't know what you're gonna get. And being launched in 1999 and predating 4chan by a whole 4 years, this site has a lot of history. And while we're already 3 episodes in, we're just getting started. So today on Sakura Stardust, we're gonna be looking at even more threads, memes, and lore. I did not mean to make that rhyme on purpose. That originated from 2chan. This urban legend is infamous to online users in Japan, and the thing is, it could be an urban legend, or it could be a completely valid and real collection of files that is now lost media. This story begins in 2006. This was the year that a highly concerning file was supposedly leaked online. This file is recalled as specifically being leaked to Winnie, a Japanese peer-to-peer file sharing program that was popular and frequently used around this time. This Winnie program itself was downloaded through 2chan itself, as an archived version of the defunct webpage and 2chan thread states. Winnie was especially popular to 2chan users, as the file-sharing service had the same appeal as 2chan itself did. This was because both web pages could be utilized anonymously, and as you can imagine, this could provide a platform to share and discuss various unsavory topics and activities. Among these was a disturbing file referred to as the 8chan file. Within this file is said to be a collection of images arranged in a way that tell kind of a narrative. All photos feature the same woman pictured throughout various milestones of her life. While reports vary regarding the specific photos in the file, most accounts state that the series of images begin with the woman's school entrance ceremony, followed by later life milestones and images of the woman taken when traveling or on vacation. The claims also deny any risque or suggestive photos existing within the file. At the very end of the collection, the very final photos are said to take a disturbing turn, as these photos, or photo depending on the account, show the woman at her funeral, within a casket after she had passed on. Some claim the woman's face is visible, while others state it was a photo of the woman herself that was placed on top of the coffin. Some online had touted outlandish tales of this file being cursed, that it finds you, whether it's forwarded suddenly or presented online. It finds you when it's ready to find you. Some legends claim that the files add photos each time a user opens it, that each file is added at the end and is a photo of the viewer at their very own funeral, suggesting they're next. While plenty of accounts can be found on Twitter, blogs, and elsewhere online, the file itself remains lost and its existence unconfirmed. In addition to the accounts, frequent mentions of 8chan's file's curse can be found as well. The topic of the 8chan file was featured within an original video anthology series known as The Curse of 2chan. 8 volumes of the series were made between 2010 and 2014. Each episode details real events that had occurred within the site's boards. Its inclusion in the series is noteworthy because the series focuses on substantial events and confirmed occurrences. It doesn't really touch on things that are unconfirmed to exist, which suggests that the file and threads discussing it could have still been floating around at the time this video was made and directly used as sources. Mentions of the 8chan file go as far back as an infamous virus known as the Kintama virus. This malicious spyware spread throughout P2P programs at the time, and this could prove to be quite telling of the file's origins. The virus is known for extracting images off the user's computer, for them to be later posted online without their knowledge or permission, among other awful things. And for that reason, many speculate that the 8chan file are files that come from somebody's personal computer and were extracted by the Kintama virus. Now, the earliest surviving mentions of the 8chan file that can be found are within archived threads discussing Winnie specifically, with some referring to the girl in the photos as Akemi-chan rather than 8chan. Some also claim that these photos were taken from a family member's personal computer by the Kintama virus, and that it was originally somebody's personal memories of this girl, possibly named Akemi. This information was uncovered by Japanese YouTuber the Tubero, highly recommend by the way, who put a great amount of effort in locating the source of these rumors and potentially the file itself. While the file itself remains lost media and it's unknown if it still exists online in any form now, many mentions of the file still remain. Not all of them and not the very first mentions, but there are still plenty online. The Tubero themselves believes that the file itself definitely existed, as there's just too much discussion among those who saw it, in addition to some recognizing the girl as Akemi, for it to just be a spooky rumor. In addition, the Tubero was able to locate records of a file similar to 2chan. This one supposedly contains photos of a couple, but ended with images of the funeral of one of their grandparents. The photos could have been stolen by the Kitama virus and may have contained the virus as well. The program Winnie is still around today, but it's common knowledge how dangerous using it can be. It's also just not commonly used in this day and age anymore. So if you ever do encounter a file like the 2chan file, just don't open it. Just don't. Geez, how do I even begin explaining this one? Okay, so the Samejima Incident is a supposed incident that was frequently mentioned on 2chan. These mentions were often fleeting in nature, and the conversation of those claiming to know about it did not provide much, if anything at all. What was claimed is that these incidents were heavily covered up by the Japanese government and the Public Safety Intelligence Agency. It's something apparently so heinous that it cannot be discussed. The first surviving mention was recorded in the year 2001 on the information boards. The thread was titled, "Let's Discuss the Legendary Samejima Thread." According to the thread's creator, Samejima had become a legendary topic on the boards already, but despite that, the original thread from years ago, describing the details of the Samejima incident, was removed at some point. The LP was asking if anyone knew what happened and why that original thread was now gone. They also claimed to have been shocked when they read this supposed original thread for the first time. Now, despite all of this, not a single detail of what happened and what the incident involves is mentioned, and the way it was written seemed to be intentional so viewers would become confused and curious. There were some posters in there who started incorporating details of the incident in small and cryptic fragments. There were also a lot of people who claimed to have read the original thread too and were highly disturbed by it. The Samejima incident would go on to be frequently mentioned on the site, but when it would always be super secretive and cryptic and involve people talking about how taboo the topic itself was rather than elaborating anything. With how many people were out there claiming to know about the incident but not talk about it, it was kinda clear that this whole thing was just becoming a massive inside joke within the 2chan community and a way to mess with the users that weren't clued in. There were eventually users who would become annoyed when the Samejima incident topic was brought up in discussion, telling people to just stop or answer that it was a dumb joke when clueless users asked about it. Now, at the very same time, some users still took the topic very seriously and told people it was a dark element of 2chan's early days that they're too afraid to speak of. In the years to follow, publications and media would discuss the Samejima incident, or rather the phenomenon of it. Some believe it's among 2chan's most infamous urban legends. To this day, mentions of the incident are still seen on 5chan and other surviving text and image board sites, which some say it's kind of something that's passed down from generation to generation now. When comparing, there are more people who believe it's just an elaborate and long-standing inside joke, and a tremendous amount of users remain faithful and committing to the bit and thus creating a false sense of reality, if that is the case. There is no confirmation if there really is a Samejima incident to this day, and if there is, it's very well concealed. So much so that I cannot even tell you what the heck this incident entails myself. But I do suppose that is for the best. The horrors of the Samejima incident are not for the faint of heart. Perhaps we should move on. This thread isn't creepy for its contents, but rather its lack of contents and bizarre patterns of activity within it. So, the original post was made way back on July 10th of 2006. The prompt was innocent enough. Simply the OP asking what TV network was best at providing high-quality live footage in their broadcasts. The thread received no responses following this. If anyone out there has any opinions regarding this, please share them in the comments though. Fuji TV is pretty banger in my opinion. They're pretty good. With ultimately no responses, the thread went cold and forgotten, sinking to the bottom with a plethora of other long untouched threads within the site. That is until December 7th of 2008, 2.5 years later. It was at this point that a second post was finally received on this thread. It simply read, "Why is this thread so empty?" The poster may have found the topic interesting and was simply surprised to see it never received any engagement. But then a third response showed up. A response that read, "Koko ni iru yo," or "I'm here," was given only 30 seconds after this new 2008 post. So, little recap. We got that initial 2006 post, the one asking about the quality of live broadcast footage. And then we have these two posts from 2008, from separate users, which 2chan does show you if it's a separate user or not based on IP address, and they're 30 seconds within each other. Now, the way 2chan threads work is that they don't necessarily float to the top when there's recent activity unless the poster allows it to be bumped. So yeah, typically the thread would be bumped to the top, but if you put a phrase that indicates that you want it to stay under in your response to the thread, it will not be bumped to the top, and that's exactly what happened in the second response. This post had included a specification that made sure this thread wouldn't be bumped when new posts were made. So, this over 2-year-old unpopular thread with no responses or conversation within it would have been long buried and would have taken quite some time and effort to ultimately get to. So, for another user to reply immediately like that, well, it's creepy. The "I'm here" user would have had to have been there lurking at the exact same time as the poster who asked why the thread went cold. Like, imagine you're waiting for somebody you're DMing to respond to you, like sitting there waiting for them to finish their reply and you see the little bubbles, you know what I mean. Only, this is a random person in a thread that hadn't received any replies in years, and the Koko ni iru yo person had no idea this ancient thread would receive a response at that exact moment. Plus, you gotta manually refresh the page to see any new activity at all. Like, constantly keep refreshing it for the new activity that was non-existent in this thread until that exact very moment. Yeah, you get the point by now. Now, what I immediately thought after reading this is that somebody could have made the comment and simply asked a friend to go to that same exact thread and comment right after to make it creepy. Maybe one of them knew about this thread beforehand and just planned to do it to get a reaction out of the other users online. And if that is what happened, well, it sure did work. Some people also think this may have been the same person with just two different computers. Remember, this was 2008 and smartphones weren't really a thing just yet. Nowadays, this is a lot easier to replicate because, you got the phone and you got the computer. But back then, not so easy. And of course, this could have just been some wild and creepy stroke of luck. Maybe two people were both on this thread just wondering the same thing at the same exact point in time. Now, there is one other outcome, one similar to what happened with the infamous hard copy pasta I discussed in a previous video. That the screenshot could be fake. This is backed up by how nobody can find an archive of the original thread itself nowadays. However, it is 2024, and that's not that surprising considering how many threads are lost to time now. If it does happen to be a genuine exchange though, it's hard to get past how unsettling it would be to see such a sudden response. And while the "Koko ni iru yo" quote with the little face is kind of a popular reference online now, part of me feels like the person behind this was just trying to be friendly and excited instead of scary. Just saying like, hey, I'm here. Like excited that they're sharing an interest, I guess. Again, if it is real. We all know our queen Hatsune Miku, And also what Crunchyroll did to her recently, putting her on a TV screen during her concerts and such, but aside from all that, she is glorious and quickly became a staple of Japanese pop culture following the initial release of her voice bank in 2007. Now, Kasane Teto is another story. While definitely popular in her own right as a kind of iconic off-brand Miku, but also widely used and appreciated due to her accessibility and unique voice. Her origins vary greatly from Miku. In short, she was originally conceived as an elaborate troll hoax on 2chan. The year was 2008. Hatsune Miku had officially released about a year prior, and many online users were already obsessed with her. For that reason, a lot of Vocaloid discussion and hype was going on within the 2chan boards at that point in time. Now, a group of 2chan users that frequent the VIP boards, or rather found themselves there after moderators had enough of their shenanigans elsewhere on the site, thought this was an ample opportunity to mess around with all these new Vocaloid fans. These users are often referred to as VIPers, and the term VIP is used sarcastically. It's anything but a VIP experience in there, I assure you. I've heard it's very similar to the random board on 4chan. So these VIP members decided to make up their own Vocaloid character, complete with art, character description, and intended voice actress. Having the nerve to claim that Doraemon's voice actor at the time was coming on board for this project. And they told those in the board that this was a leak for the new Vocaloid voice bank. Despite the fact that the initial Teto reveal post was made on April 1st, people ate this news up, rejoiced even. The art accurately replicated the style of the Vocaloid box art back then, and was very believable looking. Like, those people who made Smash character leaks back in the day, they should have been taking notes. Nobody called the bluff on the Vipers, and it continued to escalate and spread throughout the forums. So who exactly is Kasane Teto? What is her lore? Well, she was described to be a 31-year-old chimera who was fused with a bat. Teto ages slowly, so appears to be 15 years old, close to Miku's canonical age of 16. Another detail that was mentioned is that she's pretty upset when her age is brought up. Self-conscious even. She also loves Norway and French bread. Oh, and she's a tsundere. Of course she's a tsundere. Now, while many became very excited for Teto's supposed release, time passed and that release never actually came. People actually caught on to the joke and were pretty angry. Also, pretty attached to this character and really wanting her to be real now. But as fate would have it, it was around the same time that the software Utau was born. Brief rundown, it's essentially a freeware alternative to Vocaloid that anyone can create voice banks for. This was a game changer because, well, Vocaloid software, voice banks, and licenses, they're expensive. I don't think many realize all the things you have to pay for just to make music with the Vocaloid software. It's not like software like Ableton and, GarageBand. You gotta jump through a lot of hoops to actually make music with Vocaloids. Anyways, Utau, being free, made this community a lot more accessible. And it also allowed a vehicle to make Kasane Teto a reality. A voice actor named Mayo Oyamano came forward and provided the voice to use in Teto's official voice bank. By this time, Vipers who created the prank weren't involved at all. It was the newfound fans of Teto that made her what she is today, which is pretty darn popular. Of course, she blew up in popularity initially following her official inclusion to Utau, but years later, Teto would be officially recognized and included in the Project Diva video games alongside Hatsune Miku herself. Teto has also been included on official Hatsune Miku merch in the past. Ever since then, it's become somewhat common for those on the VIP boards to create some kind of wacky Vocaloid parody character for Utau. They're now referred to as Viperloids and often have some kind of wild backstory and design. They get pretty outlandish, I assure you. I'll link an interesting thread I found on r/hobbydrama if you want to read up on this topic more. Time for a little emotional roller coaster. The anonymous nature of the boards allows for some pretty interesting confessions. And of all the bizarre stories on 2chan's, Stalker stories are probably the most common genre of story found on 2chan. While most of them involve speakers who are unaware of how abnormal and, well, unhinged their actions are. A good example of this is the Denko Saga, a topic explored back in episode 1 of the series. The difference with this story, a thread originally posted in 2012, one that makes it extremely compelling, is how the poster is now well aware of the severity of their actions, claiming to be a former stalker, and no longer engaging in these actions after almost a decade of following someone. The poster begins this thread warning that this may just be a lot of her ranting to herself, and that she just wants some anonymous people online to simply hear her story. There are responses agreeing to listen right from the start, and the story begins. OP, who refers to herself as Poochy, is a 22-year-old adult who has entered the workforce. She claims to look similar to actress Juri Ueno in the drama Nodame, and the object of her affection is a 24-year-old man referred to as Matsu, also a working adult. She describes him as stoic and similar in appearance to an actor referred to as Yampi, and after a little research, I believe she's referring to actor Tomohisa Yamashita. Now, Poochy had met Matsu almost 10 years prior to this post, back when they were in middle school. She recalls falling in love with Matsu as he won an award at her school's annual athletic meet, stating that it was love at first sight. Because there was a difference in 2 years, Poochy was pretty sure they'd never have a chance to meet and talk, so she took matters into her own hands. She recalls initially just watching him play basketball when her class would be out in the same area. Eventually, though, Poochy was able to interview Matsu through a club she was involved in, as she made the suggestion of interviewing the star athletes of the school. Once she conducted the interview, she found herself jotting down random little facts about the boy in her notebook, stuff like his food preferences and such. And eventually, these friends referred to OP as Poochy due to her following Matsu around like a puppy. However, included in the things Poochy had learned was that Matsu had a girlfriend. And throughout the whole thing, Matsu was pretty friendly to her. Now, at this point, it probably just sounds like a typical shoujo anime or J-drama, right? Well, don't forget that she's a self-proclaimed stalker. Cause after summer break, Poochy was gifted with a camera, and that camera quickly became filled with images of Matsu. Poochy also admitted to taking stray hairs from Matsu's desk and lunch chair table and swiping his used gym towels. Later on, she would also admit to trying to bottle up his smell. So, on the day of Matsu's graduation, Poochy wrote him a love letter, one she recalled as being rather cringe. Matsu never replied to the letter, and the last middle school interaction was him patting her on the head before he left. Matsu apparently got into a school known for its athletic program. Poochy decided she would become athletic as well so she could get into that same school in a couple of years. She would also pass by Matsu's school on her way home and even his home at night when pretending to go for a jog. She also attempted keeping in touch with Matsu but never really received any responses. Now she eventually did get into Matsu's school. Around the same time, Matsu had began responding to Poochy yet again, saying he broke up with his girlfriend, found a new one, and recently broke up with her too. And once Poochy entered high school, she realized Matsu was very popular, and he also stopped talking to her again once he found another girlfriend. At this point, after 3 years, Poochy tried finally moving on, dating a boy for 4 months before breaking it off. The boy did treat her well, but she just couldn't forget about Matsu. But shortly after, Matsu got dumped and ended up calling Poochy up yet again when upset. Poochy realized now that Matsu was only using her for consolidation whenever he got dumped and nobody else wanted to talk to him. Despite that, she still thrived off the attention because that's all she wanted. Soon Matsu left for university. At this point, approaching adulthood herself, Poochy decided to terminate all contact though, feeling she really had to get over him at this point. Eventually, Poochy had learned that Matsu's sister was unwell though. Stricken with grief for him, she established contact yet again. Though she later learned that Matsu once again found another girlfriend and became jealous once again. Feeling like this whole thing was very unhealthy and shouldn't continue, she deleted his number yet again. At this point, Poochy was going to a separate university studying early child development, though despite her best efforts, she once again found herself feeling the urge to stalk Matsu. So when he called her up yet again, drunk and wanting help in getting home from the bar, she agreed. This ended up being a reoccurring thing, and eventually the two became intimate following the drunken advances of Matsu. It was Poochy's first time. And guess what? if you were expecting some kind of episode or dramatic plot twist, there really isn't one, because eventually the two ended up dating. Well, I guess there is kind of a plot twist. You know how Poochy said that the stalking is over now and she's a former stalker? Well, that's because they became engaged and got married. Following the wedding, Poochy found out that she was pregnant, and it was finding out that she was expecting that made her feel the urge to admit her history of stalking to the users of 2chan, to just get it off her chest. So I wouldn't say that this story is creepy or unsettling, but I also would not say that it's a happy ending entirely either. Primarily because it seems Poochy was a tad, obsessive, and Matsu had a habit of taking advantage of that. But this thread is 12 years old now, and their child is probably 10 or 11 years old by now. It makes you wonder if it's still working out for them. Perhaps they grew past their behavior as teens, and they're happy together now. Poochy did refer to herself as a former stalker after all. This image is a staple of the early internet, and if you're unfamiliar with Longcat, well, I'm here to tell you it's exactly how it sounds. He's a very long boy. Around 2005 and 2006, this exact image of a cat being held up, paws sticking out, and exceptionally long became popular on the boards of 2chan. On there, their nickname was Nobiko. The name is a play on the term nobi, which means to extend or stretch out something. Adding ko to the end makes it a name. And voila, Nobiko. While Nobiko is well loved in Japan, the adoration soon spread overseas to the English-speaking 4chan. This was when all the image edits came about, as well as the name Longcat. They even developed lore for Longcat, involving an endgame level final battle known as Katnarok, where Longcat battled their arch nemesis, Toknol. Yes, that is Longcat spelled backwards. This online popularity reached the owner of Longcat/Nobiko, and it was learned that the cat's real name is Shiro, which means white. It's a pretty popular pet name. Shiro's owner also shared that Shiro is female, and was rescued from the streets as a kitten in 2002. She was also measured at one point, being around 65 centimeters from head to toe. That's about 26 inches. Now, 2002 was a long time ago. It doesn't feel like it to me, but I know it was a long time ago. But I'm here to tell you that Shiro lived a long and happy life. Their owner updated their online fans for many years on their Twitter account. It was in September of 2020 that Shiro's owner made the announcement that Shiro had passed away. But Shiro was able to live 18 happy years. Despite their passing, Longcat is remembered online and throughout media, most notably in Gigantamax Meowth's design, among many other things. Were you guys familiar with Longcat? Let me know your favorite internet cats over the years in the comments. I'm personally very particular to Uni. You know, this little guy. There's also Maru, the guy who likes the boxes and jumps in the boxes. He's still alive and his owner still makes videos, by the way. Husky and Medley is a romance manga that was published in the year 2009 and is often regarded online as one of the best and most realistic yuri manga as far as story and character development goes. It centers around a girl who goes by the name Medley online. She attends an all-girls high school and has a crush on one of her classmates, known as Husky, because she has a Siberian Husky as a pet. Medley begins a 2chan thread in order to ask users what Husky's weak points are in an attempt of trying to win her affection. Now, what's unique about this manga, and probably why many praise the story for how natural and realistic it all is that it's based on a real-life 2chan thread, one that became quite popular. It's very similar in nature to the Densha Otoko thread, discussed back in episode 2 of the series, that involves a shy otaku trying to win the affection of a girl he met on the train. In the original Husky and Medley thread, Medley is given the advice of having a flirty conversation with Husky and seeing how she responds. This advice ends up being successful, and she ends up inviting Husky to her house. And later on in the thread, the two reportedly end up dating. Much like the Densha Otoko thread, the OP returned every now and then to update users on how everything was going, as well as ask for advice on how to keep the relationship going smoothly. Now, the thread does get a bit spicy in parts, and it's stuff I cannot discuss here. So if you want the whole thing, the manga is out there in English. As far as the real-life couple, Medley reported in one of the final forum posts that they were going to college together and doing well. It wouldn't be until 10 years following the manga that a Twitter account would surface claiming to be owned by the real-life Medley herself. This account is now private, but according to reports from 2019, this poster claimed that her and Husky were still together and going strong, recently celebrating 10 years together. It's worth noting that this account was created back in 2013, and the poster didn't come forward about being Medley until 2019. Now, whether this is genuine or if the original 2chan thread was genuine, who's to say? It all could have been a writer looking to brainstorm before creating the manga itself. But I like to think that it's a genuine love story aided by 2chan users. Because that would be really neat. Okay, before we get into all of this, let me define this Japanese term that's up on screen right now. This is a combination of kanji read as enjo. While the nature of the word, using the kanji for something being engulfed in flames, is very similar to the English slang of flaming, like when you post a guilty pleasure fanfiction and at the end you say no flames please. Wait, do people even do that anymore? The closer definition of this act is canceling someone by generating hate and getting the masses involved in said canceling. Next, we're brought to a comedian named Smiley Kikuchi, a man who's built his entire career on this character who's kind of a jerk. The character he performs is somebody with a very distinct personality, let's just say that. His routines often feature him grinning widely as he insults the audience, among similar things. It really makes an impression, but that's just 'cause he's a good actor, it's just an act. Kinda like Joffrey in Game of Thrones. The actor and the character are two completely different things. And that's my second Game of Thrones reference this month. Now, due to this act that Smiley Kikuchi keeps up when he performs, there are some people who take it a little too personally and just don't like him as a person because of his comedy routine alone. In 2009, among the most outspoken people who dislike Smiley Kikuchi took to 2chan. And what did they do on 2chan? Engaged in extreme acts of enjo. People came together and began making false claims. Claims that Kikuchi was involved in a murder. And not just any murder, but the infamous case of the Concrete Girl, or kidnapping and murder of 17-year-old Junko Furuta. If you're unfamiliar with this case, do not look it up. I'm serious, it's sickening, and I will not be going into much detail here, so don't worry about that, we're moving on. Now, how did these 2chan users correlate Kikuchi with one of the most heinous crimes in Japan's history? First, it was found that Smiley was born in 1976, making him around 12 or 13 when the crime had occurred in the late 80s. Second, it was also discovered that he grew up in Adachi, Tokyo, where this crime had taken place. So, Smiley was a preteen in Adachi at the same time as these events, and that was enough for people to devise a false story to spread online. And they did exactly that on 2chan, even lying and saying Kikuchi was born in 1972, which would mean he would be about 16 or 17 at the time of the crime, though that was completely falsified. But that made the story more believable combined with where he had grown up. After the initial spread on 2chan, it was found that Kikuchi had recently started a personal blog. Those who believed the rumors and claims took to this blog, pitchforks in hand, and filled the comment section of each and every post with nothing but hate. While all of this is long past now, it's said that Kikuchi had to constantly delete his comments, going through and wiping them every 15 minutes. Back then, auto-moderation did not exist. The hate comments and threats just never stopped though, with many people genuinely believing that Smiley was a murderer that happened to find success and fame as a comedian with zero repercussions. It had gotten so bad that Kikuchi had said that he was receiving direct threats and had to go file a police report, genuinely fearing for his life. He presented all the comments and messages he had received as evidence. While things like this aren't often taken very seriously in the West, this harassment and borderline stalking was taken very seriously by Japanese authorities. So much so that they were able to trace back this harassment to 18 specific 2chan users. An investigation was done, and action was taken on these 18 users for harassment. One specific user, an unnamed woman, had been contacted by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police regarding suspicion on intimidation tactics. And while the exact identities of these users aren't completely known, the media had mentioned a high school student and another student attending university that were involved. Now, before I go any further, truly bad people should be called out on the bad things they do. Absolutely. The fact that random teens, though, can destroy an innocent person's career just because they don't like the work they do as an entertainer is highly disturbing. And the damage was still done, as it typically goes with these kinds of things. Many people will hear these claims, believe them on the spot, and not fact-check or search for updates later on. To this very day, years later, Kikuchi's career has been tarnished due to these false claims. His blog was briefly taken down back in 2009, but now it's back up and the online flames have died down. Kikuchi remains working as a comedian, landing a number of acting and voice acting roles throughout the 2010s. In 2018, he wrote a book about the whole ordeal he faced and the toll it took on his career. This is a 2012 thread detailing a pretty mundane yet indirectly eventful day a poster had, after reading something in a bathroom stall a week prior. This thread reads like a written work, but it's believed to likely be a real person sharing a moment of vulnerability anonymously online. It all begins with OP waking up on a sad futon within his tiny apartment. It's inferred that he's not yet in his ideal place in life, not happy with his looks, and doesn't believe he's regarded very highly by those around him. Now, OP doesn't typically prefer Western food, but decided one day to go to a burger place for lunch. As he orders, just awkwardly muttering the word cheeseburger and nothing else, he feels like the cashier is regarding him as something repulsive. He receives his order, and as he leaves, he's reminded of graffiti he witnessed in a bathroom stall at an electronics store. It read, "If you throw a cheeseburger at a cool guy, it's highly dangerous." Perhaps OP subconsciously decided to get a burger due to that being in the back of his mind this whole time. He considers this and feels he needs to conduct a little experiment, simply convincing himself that this had to be done for science. And thus, OP goes to a nearby park, and instead of tossing his cheeseburger at some random pedestrian he deemed cool, OP had slightly different plans. Suddenly, he threw the cheeseburger upwards above his head, and the burger unceremoniously split apart and lightly plopped onto OP's face as it came back down in separate components. And, of course, nothing happened. He opened his eyes and saw his warm, fresh burger wasted on the grass. So, ultimately, OP decided to test this cheeseburger theory on themselves just to see if the universe deemed them as cool. And because there was no reaction between OP and the aerial cheeseburger, that seemed to be the odd validation they needed in their head to just confirm that they weren't traditionally cool. Feeling rather embarrassed by what they just did in public, but also relieved and happy nothing actually did happen, if something did, that'd be pretty interesting, they meekly collected the burger off the floor and went back home, reflecting on their bizarre actions today as they wrote out that very post, concluding that the only thing they tasted that day was reality. The raw testimonies of anonymous users like this reveal a lot about Japanese society and the mentality of some of its citizens. Piecing together the fragments that are these confessional little threads really do shed light on some things. Anyways, I personally hope OP is happier with themselves nowadays. While 2chan is known for real-life events and retelling, some lean fully into the potential of creative writing on the forums. While the anonymity of the site allowed people to publish their written works anonymously, of course, and receive unbiased thoughts on their work, some fictional works played out like RPing in a chat, where various posters influenced the story in unique ways, not just the original writer. We actually discussed one just like that, well, if Husky and Medley is a work of fiction, that is. While writing stories on 2chan is a popular thing to do, it's not every day that the posters themselves come forward and claim their work. And it's even less common for a poster to go on and become a popular writer after starting out on 2chan. Well, unless there's a lot of writers out there that just never admitted to starting out on 2chan. Oftentimes, written works on threads can originate from a place of vulnerability or a lack of confidence, and they indirectly capture a glimpse of the poster's outlook on things around them. For Sugaru Miaki, who was originally referred to online as Fafoo, 2chan was a true creative outlet. From 2011 to 2013, they regularly posted written works to the site, eventually creating their own page, claiming all of the works as their own. Many found themselves drawn to the stories that Fafoo presented on 2chan for the writing style they practiced. That role-playing style I had mentioned previously was not used here. Fafoo's works are often described as incredibly slow burns. They have a lot of small moving parts with bits of foreshadowing, but the gears themselves don't connect and begin moving towards understanding until at least halfway through each story. Those sudden revelations and moments when everything just clicks were very exciting moments for those reading the threads as they happened. Bro would just emerge on the forums without warning, start writing peak, immediately intriguing those present in the thread, and everyone just loved it. People would eagerly anticipate Fafoo's next banger for the 2.5 years they were actively writing on 2chan. The Fafoo threads were often copied and shared on other web pages and blogs, and their written work spread like wildfire in the Japanese internet during the early 2010s. Fafoo's final work on the boards, 2013's How It Feels Rewinding 10 Years and Starting Over at 10, was also their very first published work, revised and simply renamed Starting Over. From here, Fafoo would officially transition to a published author and creator of a number of well-received light novels, some of which later being adapted to manga and live-action works. And among their most well-known work is 3 Days of Happiness, a light novel and manga that originated from one of their 2chan threads. It's also been published in both English and Korean. It's a very well-written work that discusses the value of one's life. In 2019, Miaki was nominated for the 40th Eiji Yoshikawa Literature Newcomer Award for his story, Your Story. And nowadays, they remain active on Twitter and reside within Iwate Prefecture. If you're interested in reading any of their original threads, somebody has been translating these threads into English. That guy will be linked below. This series of somewhat cryptic posts turned into something heinous and possibly preventable. And the worst part is, this isn't the only topic like this in this video. In May of 2000, a 2chan user who referred to themselves as Neo Mugicha or Neo Barley Tea began a thread with the title Saga Prefecture, Saga City, 17 years old. Below that was ha 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 written in katakana. No further context was given. For this reason, many in the thread were confused. Some looked up these keywords and hadn't found anything. Others checked the TV stations for any news reports, still nothing. Most were baffled, simply wondering what this was referring to. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be long before those in the thread and those throughout Japan would know what the poster was referring to, for this post was not in third person, referring to a news report unrelated to them. This post was in first person. It would only be a few hours later that this same poster would be on the news throughout Japan, and it would be realized that these online posts were a warning of future events. Immediately after making this post on a computer, they then walked to a bus station center located in Saga City and waited for the next bus. One would arrive just a half hour later. This bus was a Nishitetsu bus. These are larger buses that take passengers longer than the typical distance. This specific bus was set to leave Saga City for its destination of Tenjin in Fukuoka Prefecture. The whole ride itself is a little over an hour in duration. 20 other passengers had boarded this bus along with the Neo Mugicha poster. The bus was set to arrive shortly after 2 p.m. and almost made it to its destination, but at 1:35 p.m. the plans came to an abrupt halt. This was when the Neo Mugicha poster decided to stand up from his seat on the bus, pull out a large chef's knife he had in his possession, and hold it to the driver of the bus. This knife was estimated to be about 30 to 40 centimeters in length. The poster, later revealed to be a teenage boy, told the driver to remain calm, but not go to Tenjin, as this boy was now taking control of the bus. Where exactly did this teenager intend to take the bus? The announcement he would next make to the passengers was cryptic, but showed he had nothing but horrific intentions for those on board. For he stated that they were no longer going to Tenjin, but instead going to hell. The teen also demanded that all phones, jackets, and watches be thrown onto the floor, so no passengers could contact authorities, conceal weapons, or even be aware of the time. The teen then demanded that if anyone did not listen to him, the results would be fatal, and demanded the driver remain on the same expressway for the time being. He also demanded all bus curtains be closed so nobody could see what was going on inside. Eventually, the 17-year-old demanded the bus turn and drive to Okayama, a city 6 hours north of Saga. Among the passengers in the bus was a 6-year-old girl, on her first bus ride alone and on her way to see her grandparents. Women were demanded to sit up front and men in the back. It's worth noting that only 4 men were on board this bus. It was realized very early on that this 17-year-old was clearly very unwell. As one of the passengers was asleep during the initial part of the hijacking, the boy became enraged by this and severely wounded her after startling her awake. The bus hijacking would not be reported until 2:47 p.m., well after the bus was supposed to arrive, when a 40-year-old woman was able to escape. This was when the hijacker allowed the bus to stop so passengers could use the restroom one at a time. The woman who went first was the one able to run and escape and make the phone call and report the hijacking. Unfortunately, this enlarged the unstable teen, resulting in the wounding of another woman on board. Sometime around then, another woman was able to escape through a bus window. Once this was noticed, the boy became violent once again and severely wounded a third female passenger. This situation would continue without resolve until 5:03 a.m. the next day. Police became involved shortly after the phone call, barricading roads, but ultimately letting the bus slowly pass in fear of the perpetrator becoming violent yet again. And during this whole situation, the teen boy would call the police repeatedly and taunt them and bargain with them or attempt to bargain with them. Another passenger, a man, was able to escape out a window at some point during all this. But see, these phone calls ended up helping the authorities in a number of ways, specifically in identifying the Neil Mugicha poster. This information remains private due to his age and him being a minor at the time of all this. Eventually, the bus stopped in a tunnel and the boy forced out all male passengers aside from the driver, leaving only the women and the 6-year-old girl. It wasn't until 6:30 p.m. that police decided to completely block the bus, force it into a parking lot, and were able to get the 3 injured women off the vehicle. 2 of the 3 survived due to this intervention. The third, a 68-year-old woman, had already passed on. They then allowed the bus to travel again. And this was when the media was recording everything, revealing the poster themselves on TV. At some point in the night, the boy's parents had arrived to the scene as well, trying to persuade the boy to stop all of this, ultimately to no avail. Apparently, the boy had been acting out to his parents and younger sister for quite some time now. He was gifted a computer to study for university entrance exams, but instead became chronically online, doing nothing but browsing 2chan's threads at all hours of the day. The topics he was most interested in were dark and disturbing. At 5 a.m., a SWAT team finally decided to make their move, throwing stun grenades into the vehicle and taking the teen by force. Many wonder why it took so long to get control over this teen, but this kind of bus hijacking had never happened before in Japan prior to this. But all that aside, if all of this didn't enrage you yet, like it did for me when I read all of this, it may after what I'm about to tell you. 6 years. He only spent 6 years in a medical reformatory facility. That's it. He was released in 2006. Later on, another 2chan poster naming themselves Nigo Mugishi or Neo Barley Beer would make similar claims on 2chan, this time towards a railway company. Because the lesson was learned from the Neo Mugicha incident, this poster was arrested before history could repeat itself. Also, if it's any consolidation, a hostage rescue team was officially established in Hiroshima Prefecture following these events as well. In 2007, a thread was started with a disturbing subject line. The poster was admitting to murdering his own mother. And below this, it read, "She screamed, 'Why?' why? Most people assumed the poster was simply trolling. Some responded saying that was an awful thing to joke about. The OP only replied with emoticons without elaborating further, and people just decided to eventually shrug it off. That is, until the very next morning, when the news broke that a 17-year-old boy in Fukushima had murdered his 47-year-old mother, went to an internet cafe to watch Beastie Boy videos, then went to turn himself in to the police with a bag containing part of her body. Many immediately felt this validated the thread as it being created by that very same 17-year-old, while others looked into it more so, not fully believing it just yet, and thinking it may just be a coincidence. It was discovered that OP was active between 9 and 11 p.m. the night prior to the news breaking. The official report stated the crime had occurred at 1 a.m., so if OP and the assailant really were one and the same, that would mean that he posted before actually committing the crime, from his home and not from the internet cafe. Either that or the 17-year-old's testimony had an incorrect timeline. It was reported that the room in the cafe that the teen had rented was not one that featured internet access. It only had the DVD player where he watched the Beastie Boy videos. There's also how the boy did not mention posting to 2chan at all during the interrogation. In short, whether or not this one is a troll remains unknown. Despite everything, it is a very disturbing coincidence. Oh my goodness, you're back already. Man, I did not see you there. Welcome to the end of the video. This is about the time where I read my Patreon shoutouts. Those who support me on Patreon, depending on the tier, get a verbal shoutout or they get an on-screen shoutout, which will also be right here. And before we get started, a lot of people in my Discord server, by the way, I also have a Discord server attached to the Discord. That keeps shaking. So if you have access to my Patreon, you also get access to my Discord server. And people were saying that you should sing your Patreons again. It's something I've done a couple times before, just as kind of a joke, just to be silly. But people were like, oh, I missed that, you should do it again. So you know what we're doing today? We're singing the Patreon names. So, huge, tremendous thank you to Why Trash Earth. Oh wait, I gotta sing it, that's right. Huge, tremendous thank you to Why Trash Earth, Aiden Sexton, Roberto Madrigal, J-Man Keith Bailey, DXDDY, or maybe that says Diddy, I don't know. Zhang Huangsha, I believe you pronounce that, or Quang Hansha, I'm pretty sure it's the former. David Lawrence, Hozonkai, Erlin Nightflot, Peripheral Visionary, Gabriel, Connor McLaughlin, Jordan May, Shelfie, Victoriano, Stephen Bride, Carlos D. Stevens, Everlurker 1999, Creepy Leanie, Bill Baker, Gina Britton, Luke Brown, Pigpen, Layla Bloom, Jose Santana, Lizard Queen 27, Newt Fruit Shoot, Henry Costanza, Hex Maniac, Hana Chitoge, Jeremiah BLR, 322, 32232, Rora Morasso, Lena SD98, Pada, Meek, Beebles 32, Sidnep, Hosaida Roca, Ari Ortolano, Nicole Turkowski, Akali, Mike Master, Red Hoodie 50, Mr. Anderson, Iggs, Brandon Tran, Eels, C Chameleon, Digital Dubs, Shivan Vashi, Pan Fried Life Jacket Awareness, Stagio VGM, Anigdra J. Reese, Agua Bill, Leon X8, Christopher Valencia, PP Pacasca Tag, Andrew Pena. If this is cringe, let me know and I won't do it again. VHS Vitch, Airfire, Grand Tactician, Femgirl, Erin, Soko, Bishonen, and Bishonen Knife. Thank you again, guys. If you want me to just read them normal, let me know. But yeah, thank you again, and I will see you in the next video. I got a lot of stuff planned, so you'll see me fairly soon. All right, bye guys.